Good evening. We are now calling the meeting to order. If you could please pay attention to Council Member Emerson for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise if you're able.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Would you please bow with me? Our Father in heaven, we just thank you so much, Father, for everything that you give us, Father, our lives and the very air we breathe. Father, we just ask that you give us your wisdom and presence here tonight as we discuss these matters of the city, Father. Father, there are often times that I think all of us feel so inadequate for this task. So it's only with your guidance and help that we can get to the right decision, Father. And we thank you again for everything you give us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Give our friends for National Gun Violence Awareness Day to join us, please. So this wonderful group of ladies is a group of ladies that are mothers who either have had a loss of a child to gun violence or that are standing up and advocating in solidarity with the sadly hundreds and hundreds of mothers who have lost children due to gun violence. Something that is not just plaguing our community, but is plaguing the nation. So they have stood up and they are requesting a proclamation to name a day after National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And I'll read a little bit of the proclamation because it has some interesting points. It says, whereas every day 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, on an average of there's nearly 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be killed with guns than other people in other high-income countries. And whereas protecting public safety in the communities that they serve is the mayor's highest responsibility, and whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away of people with dangerous backgrounds, and whereas mayors and law enforcement officers know their communities best and are most familiar with the local criminal activity and how to address it and how to be best positioned to understand how to keep their citizens safe. In January 2013, Hadia Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade, was tragically shot just weeks later. She should have been celebrating her 22nd birthday. To help honor Hadia and the 100 Americans whose lives are cut short, and the countless survivors who are injured by shooting every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June 7th, 2019 as the first day in June as the 5th National Gun Violence Awareness Day. So these are subjects that are kind of difficult to discuss, but they're subjects that we really cannot escape. And I appreciate the fact that in the same breath that we are talking about the challenge that we have with gun violence, we're also talking about Second Amendment rights and saying, hey, it's not about eliminating that privilege. It's about ensuring that the individuals that do have a weapon, that have been vetted, that have the ability to have that weapon without being able to hurt innocent lives. And that is what this is about. I am a big supporter. I was marching with the youth when we went to the Capitol and talked about how important it is for us to figure out some sort of gun sense. And that's not a topic that the City Council broaches. So council members breathe. This is not something that we have to do because this is a state and a federal level issue. But they are issues that even though they have legislation at the state level and at the federal level, these are things that are affecting our citizens in our cities every single day. And it's important for us to speak about them. It's important for us to stand up for what we believe in, and I appreciate these ladies for doing just that. If you could say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us a platform here today. We had a lot of information that was read already by the mayor, but another statistic that that really affects a lot of us because we are moms is that firearms are the second leading cause of death for American children and teens. The second leading cause. Access to a gun increases the risk of death by suicide by 3 times. These are a couple statistics that affect us in our community here at home. And while City Council doesn't necessarily make decisions and laws about things that are going on, you're also members of this community and you can speak up. And that is what we hope, is that our voices are heard, that we speak up and stand up for common sense gun legislation. So we wear orange in dedication to honoring the lives of Americans affected by gun violence and elevating the voices of every American who demand to end the gun violence. Orange is the color that hunters wear to protect themselves from other hunters. We wear orange to fight for a future free of gun violence. Our community is not immune to this type of violence, as many of you know, and unfortunately, many of us have experienced. We thank you, the mayor, and everyone for joining us and bringing awareness to our community, and we encourage you all to stand with us on June 7th to end gun violence and every day thereafter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Thank you.
We now move on to presentations. City of Topeka Financial Audit. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we have Sean Gordon from Meishauser here to give us a presentation on our annual financial report. And once he's complete, I have a few comments.
As Mr. Trout said, my name is Sean Gordon with Meishauser & Company. I'm the audit manager for Meishauser & Company, and we performed the 2018 audit of the city. So tonight I'll go over the CAFR document that you have in front of you, and then I can take any questions that you might have at the end of the presentation. So I just wanted to point out some of the areas of interest that you might find relevant to the audit for 2018. And that starts on page 4 through 15 in the CAFR document in front of you. This is the management's discussion and analysis section of the audit. This is management's opportunity to analyze financial results for the current year compared to the prior year in narrative format. Flipping forward, page 16 through 17 is the government-wide financial statements. These are, presents all of the activity of the city is presented here. You'll notice at the bottom of page 17, there is a prior period adjustment line. This prior period adjustment was required because of a new standard that the city was required to adopt for 2018. And that accounting standard had to do with the other post-employment benefits that the city offers its employees. So because this new standard required a calculation of the liability a little bit differently, it required an adjustment to the beginning numbers for this liability. I wanted to next point out, you'll see on pages 16 and 17 mention of the Friends of the Zoo. The Friends is considered a component unit of the city, and that relationship is discussed a little bit more on page 31 if you're interested in that. Also, we discuss here why it is considered a component unit of the city. You'll notice references to the Friends of the Zoo throughout this CAFR document. Next, I wanted to talk about some of the main note disclosures, and the first one is on page 44. This is the capital asset note. Here you'll see amounts added to and then subtracted from capital assets of the city throughout 2018. Flipping forward just a little bit, a couple pages, is page 48. This is the long-term debt note. There's quite a bit of information here that is all related to the long-term debt of the city during 2018. And then finally in this section is page 55. As I discussed earlier, the other post-employment benefits note is mentioned here. The implementation of the new accounting standard required that the calculation of this liability be calculated a little bit differently, and so there's a lot of information here related to that new standard that the city adopted. The next kind of big section is the statistical section, and this is on page 104 through 134. This is trend information over the last 10 years on a variety of topics relevant to the city's operations. So all of that I've kind of covered is the city's responsibility for the CAFR document. Our responsibilities are listed on pages 1 through 3, and our biggest responsibility is to issue an opinion on the city's financial statements. You'll notice the opinion paragraph at the top of page 2. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest and cleanest opinion we are allowed to issue. So that reflects very well on the financial management of the city for 2018. The next paragraph down is the emphasis of matter paragraph on page 2. And again, this discusses the new standard that the city was required to adopt and the effects of that on the city's beginning numbers. And then finally, I wanted to cover pages 135 through 143. This is the section on the single audit of the city. A single audit is required when an entity spends $750,000 or more of federal grant money. For 2018, we audited, as you can see on page 138, the Continuum of Care Planning Grant, which is through the Housing Department. Again, we've issued an unmodified opinion on that, which is the highest and cleanest opinion we're allowed to give under federal law. I did want to mention that the Housing Department did a great job in organizing the requests that we made of their grant files. They did a phenomenal job, and it was just great, all the information that we received from them. Again, that was an unmodified opinion both on the single audit federal grant and on the city as well. So that is it for the 2018 presentation of the audit report. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Any questions from the body with regards to the CAFR? So I always speak up on this one because I'm really passionate about the numbers, but I'm very excited to see that yet again, we have a clean report. We like to talk about transparency in a community. And one of the biggest measures of transparency is the fact that an audit is not so much, hey, we were putting money in and money out, is we have policies by which we have to abide. And the audit takes a look at random samplings of everything that we do, and they make sure that they marry it to our policies to make sure that as a governing body, we are taking every single policy that we say that we're going to use and following through with it. And that is extremely important. I think that out of the things that we talk about and that get published out there, this is one of them that we don't celebrate enough. We have had awards on our CAFR 2017. We received an award for the excellence that we had, and I'm thinking that we're going to submit again this year with hopes that this is going to be another winner. So thank you very much to the staff that ensures that we are taking care of our policies and that we're doing what we said that we were going to do for our constituents. City Manager.
Of course, I want to thank my staff as well, the accounting folks and then also finance department for their outstanding work. It's a great report, continues what we've been doing, and so it's very good to see that we're not letting up on what we're doing as our procedures.
Seeing no additional questions or comments, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We now move on to item 3, the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla?
Here.
Council members Hiller? Here. Clear? Here. Ortiz? Here. Emerson?
Here.
Padilla?
Here.
Jensen?
Present.
Mays?
Here.
Cohen?
Here.
And Lester?
Here.
We move on to item 4, appointments, if the clerk would read.
A is an advisory council appointment of Steve Schoenberg to the City of Topeka Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Council for a term ending May 31st, 2021.
We have heard the appointment. Councilman Mays?
Move to approve.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
We have several seconds, but I'll take Councilman Emerson because you spoke up. Any comments or questions with regards to this appointment? Seeing none, we proceed by voting. The mayor does not vote.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion passes. We have with us tonight Mr. Schonberg. I want to say that I am so excited about having Mr. Schonberg here. If he could please rise so that he could be recognized. One of the things that I'm very excited about is the fact that when we are working on our boards, we're always looking for diversity, and especially in the ADA board, we wanted to ensure that all abilities and all individuals who would need to be represented were present. We have a very special person with us. He is not able, he's got hearing deficit, so therefore with that, we had to make sure that we would budget for somebody that would help translate for him. And the battle of inclusion isn't won just by bringing in people. The battle of inclusion is won when you're able to make the proper accommodations to help people become successful. And I want to thank the staff for saying yes for us to have the translator so that Mr. Schonberg could be a very active member of this ADA board. So Mr. Schonberg, thank you so much for your commitment. Welcome to the team. We now move on to item 5, the consent agenda. If the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout allowing and approving city expenditures for the period March 30th, 2019 through May 3rd, 2019, and enumerating said expenditures therein. B is approval of a workers' compensation tentative settlement agreement in the amount of $14,777.75 for the permanent partial impairment the employee sustained while engaged in normal work duties. C is resolution introduced by Councilmember Sandra Clear approving a special event known as the 86th Annual Our Lady of Guadalupe Fiesta Mexicana. D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sandra Clear granting a waiver to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 106120 relating to parking on unimproved surfaces for the 2019 Fiesta Mexicana. E is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sandra Clear granting Fiesta Mexicana an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. F is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Project Forward an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. G is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Randy Wheat an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. H is minutes of the regular meeting of May 21st, 2019, and there is a list of cereal malt beverage license applications before you.
Seems like districts 2 and 3 are having a party. We have heard the consent agenda. We have a motion for approval by Councilmember Lesser, a second by Councilman Jensen. Additional comments or questions with regards to the consent agenda? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
We have 9 yes, 1 abstention.
9 having voting yes, the motion passes. It seems like there was not an intention to abstain.
Mayor, yeah, just to clarify, one of the people that involved in one of the issues, I know personally. So just didn't want to
thank you.
vote on that.
Sorry, I thought you didn't mean to, so.
No problem at all. It's good to know it works, though.
We now move on to item C, action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is an update and possible action on the proposed camping ordinance.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Here. We have a new committee on the public health and safety. And we had a meeting on March the 29th, which several members were, it was myself and Councilwoman Hiller was there. Councilman Mays was out, along with several staff members. I just kind of wanted to give this report, and then I did send out an email to both of you guys to figure out when our next meeting is. I don't know where the time went, but it went. Couple of things. I asked Corey to come back with some numbers. At that meeting, she reported 31 vouchers, which included 43 people were distributed on February 25th and March 4th. And to date, 12 households with 19 individuals have been able to get off the streets. And that's amazing. And that was reported then. Also, we'll be looking to hear from Sergeant Clam, as he was adding 2 more people to his team, so by now they should be there. What I wanted to do with our new council members is make sure that they were up to speed, and Corey wanted to present some more numbers. And it's amazing the people that we are taking off the street. And so I wanted our new council reps to get up to speed, and so we can have another meeting and then kind of start plugging into code. So that's kind of where we're at. We're still in committee. If you have a problem with it taking too long, call me, give me a call. I'll talk to you about it. Thank you.
Well, we could talk about it if the council has any questions for Councilwoman Ortiz. For the report, Deputy Mayor Clear.
So what does the committee think of the ordinance as it's written? That we received?
Well, I'll respond, and Councilman Mays and Councilwoman Hiller can jump in. A lot of our staff was gone, and I really wanted Lisa to be there to go over the ordinance, so that they are clear on the steps that we have to take to pass this ordinance. And with them being gone, we didn't talk about that. We talked about their steps, but that's why I want them to see the first presentation. But they can chime in as well.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, if I recall, and I'm new to the committee level of that, so that was my first or second meeting. The idea of staying on this periodically anyway to see, there was quite an initiative, everybody might recall, of an individual who took the initiative to really reach out to the homeless camps and work with staff at Neighborhood Relations to come up with those vouchers. And so there was a somewhat formal, somewhat informal commitment that basically the committee was going to give it a year, was going to give it the year to see how that new initiative worked out, how many of those vouchers actually were placed, how well they worked, and so on, to just give it a chance to work. There had been some interest in seeing the committee actually just recommend to take the ordinance off altogether, and under Councilwoman Ortiz's leadership, it was left just open, but kind of dormant for the year to give the new techniques a chance to work. Meanwhile, we're going to pick up the code issues starting next time, correct? Yeah. So hopefully that helps a little more.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you. So on this item, this is an action item. Are we just accepting their report, or are we going to take action on a camping ordinance tonight, or what are we going to do?
Just accepting the report.
Okay, I move to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Cohen, a second by Councilman Jensen. Additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Just a second.
Oh,
Wasn't it?
Come on, Jennifer.
Well, your button did work.
None of it worked out. Yeah. Every time. The whole system might be down.
no, Jennifer is inputting it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting an action.
Do we need to sing the Jeopardy song?
Show of hands.
We can wait a second. Councilman Corn.
Do we have any idea when maybe the camping ordinance will be coming up? Because that certainly is something that's important that we need to do something about.
Councilwoman Clear, would you like to Oh, Ortiz, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, Councilwoman Claire can talk about it. We're going to have another meeting, and we'll probably have some monthly meetings, but as I was saying to Councilwoman Claire, we've been getting people off the street, so I want to see if we can take a different twist on the ordinance. I don't know if we can. I haven't really talked to Lego, but we've been taking a lot of people, and these are just the numbers that were reported in March. And I know Corey said her numbers are even higher. So I know it's important, but at the same time, we don't have things in place with that ordinance. And Lisa, you might chime in there. We have to have certain things in place to pass the ordinance, correct? And one of them is if they deny going, or no, we have to have shelter for them. So if we go up to them, we have to offer a place of shelter, and we haven't found that yet. Even though we have a lot of partners on there, we just haven't, so that's part of passing that. And the other part is storing all of their stuff. So we have to have that in place, and I think we're kind of sort of there, if that's the way that we want to go. So there's been a lot of presentations to the committee, but nothing has been finalized, and now, we have to start all over with our committee's members to get them up to speed. So I don't want you to think that we're not doing anything. We just got new committee members, and there's a lot that's going on and a lot of partnering, but we're just not there yet. Thank you.
What's the question answered to your satisfaction, Mr. Cohen? Okay. And I think that the system is ready for us to take that vote, and the vote would be to approve the report of the committee.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item B in the action items, if the clerk would read.
B is an update and possible action on the proposed traffic and pedestrian safety ordinance.
Councilman Jensen.
Good evening, everyone. As you all know, the committee has completed its initial work on this and awaiting the Ultra Super Committee to merge with you. We understand your work is excellent, and we stand ready when you are willing and able.
So at this point, if questions, yes, Deputy Mayor Clear.
That sounds like the same report you gave last time. So what are you, are you waiting for them to finalize their?
Yes. We're waiting for them to be ready to merge.
You're done?
No, not done. Waiting for them to be ready to merge. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that have to be in place, like the shelter and that sort of thing, those are requirements for both of these ordinances, and they're doing most of the legwork on that, and there's no reason for us to pull in many of the same volunteers to work with two committees when Councilwoman Ortiz's excellent leadership is solving most of the problems for both as it sits. So
then what will you do when you finally merge?
Then we'll determine how the things she's putting in place for camping would work with the other one as well.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Great questions. Additional questions or comments? Motion to approve. We have a motion to approve the report as presented. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second by Councilman Jensen. Additional comments or questions? Seeing no additional comments or questions, Jennifer, are you ready for us? Okay. All right. We proceed by voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to the non-action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion of the governance of operations at the Topeka Zoo.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber and the other staff members that have been working hard to get this project ready for consideration, to the point of being able to have this discussion tonight on the possibility of changing the governance model that's currently used for the Topeka Zoo. One of the key persons, of course, in this process is our zoo director, Brendan Wiley. At this time, I'd like to have Brendan come forward and give a presentation on why this change should be considered. Brendan?
City Manager, Mayor, Council, thank you. And we're going to start tonight with a very brief video.
see a deer while you're on a hike. Like, people want to know specifically about the animals. And it's almost like they feel as if the Topeka Zoo animals are part of their family. They just inspire people.
We're already seeing the nostalgia with the girls just because they've grown up coming to the zoo. Every time we come, we see something different. They really have this sense of pride and ownership. They feel like they know every inch of the zoo, and so they kind of have become their own little zoo tour guides.
I'm a family of 5, and so to be able to come to the zoo with my family is just priceless to me. And my favorite is watching my kids love to be in an environment that they can flourish.
A typical day for me has never happened here. You kind of get to see the zookeeper's job as we're doing it, as opposed to usually in a lot of larger places, it's very much done before you get there.
I think zoos are so important to communities for so many reasons. We've participated in these conservation initiatives to save these animals from extinction. And so not only is it an amazing family-friendly place, they get to see these incredible animals that nobody gets to see.
I feel like the heart of what the zoo has done has really changed. And so I come back because I get to have a relationship with my kids in the most natural setting with animals that they love right here in our own town.
If folks aren't familiar with and fully involved in their local zoo, they might not fully appreciate all that goes on.
I think the biggest misconception of zoos today is that they are just animals in boxes. Zoos educate the public about animals and about conservation and just what's around us.
I think it can help people act on an individual level for conservation. I mean, we share this planet. We should help in what way we can for other species.
So there's kind of a funny thing. The Topeka Zoo is definitely a place. It's a destination, but it's not an organization. It's nothing more than a DBA. There's actually 2 organizations that work at the Topeka Zoo. One, of course, is the City of Topeka. The other is Friends of the Topeka Zoo. And tonight, we're essentially here to make a recommendation that it most likely is time to combine that effort so that there's one organization working at the zoo. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment, just make a couple quick introductions, and I'm going to try to not turn away from the microphone. So somewhere behind me is Pat Cawley, who is the current board chair of Friends of the Topeka Zoo. To his left is Jared Bednar, executive director of the FOTS, Friends of the Topeka Zoo. And then I think I saw somebody else sneak in, the past board chair, who is sitting next to Emily Patton. No, I'm sorry. The Honorable Legislator Fred Patton also joins us tonight. And I'd like to personally thank all of them for being here. So I'm going to switch to, I wonder if it's here. It is here. So switch to the topic. The agenda discussion is evaluating zoo governance. Well, what the heck does that mean? To me, it means let's have a talk. Let's discuss how to prepare our community zoo in the best possible way for the future. That's what we're really talking about. We're talking about is the model that we've used to operate this zoo for the past 40 to 50 years, is that still the best model as we move into the future? And this is a topic that's been going on since 2009. When I was hired in 2010, one of the things that was on my list of things to do was this. Obviously, it hasn't been done yet, but it's also a topic that if it's something you're going to do, it has to be done right. It has to be done at the right time, under the right circumstances, and we may be in one of those periods right now. So typically, what we talk about when a zoo changes its form of governance, that it changes it through a mechanism called a public-private partnership. And that's a term today that's used very often, and I want to take just a moment to clarify what that means in this situation. Now, in the online board, I said board agenda, council agenda, there was a lengthy presentation done in 2013 by a group called Zoo Advisors. Friends of the Zoo still contracts with Zoo Advisors today. That presentation that was done in 2013 is still a very usable presentation. It's just long. So we pulled some information out of it and are using that tonight. And it kind of starts right here. So what is a public-private partnership? Well, the city, or the governing authority, contracts with a nonprofit for an agreed-upon management fee. And I want to stress the word agreed. Remember, this is a public-private partnership. It's got to be a partnership for it to be successful. So there's things that we mutually need to come to agree with. In a public-private partnership, the city maintains ownership of all the assets, all the buildings, all the animals, all the land. It's always the city zoo. That never, ever changes. And a beautiful thing about that is that when you get a community board of directors that are focused on mission and program and not on ownership of assets, their commitment is unparalleled. And the last thing is that most or all of the employees become part of a new nonprofit operator. And that's something we'll get into just a little bit more a little bit later. So sometimes this is an easier way for people to understand what we're talking about. Who does what? The nonprofit entity essentially operates the zoo day to day, year to year. The city maintains the role of ownership of all the assets. They act as a landlord. In case your operator's not doing a great job, you can evict them, if you will. Typically, and this slide also came from the Zoo Advisors presentation, so I'm going to caveat a couple of these. There is always a funding commitment from the current governing body. There is typically some sort of financial support on capital projects. Now, in our case, that is most likely, in this scenario, referring to the half-cent countywide retailer sales tax that's designated towards the zoo. I will bring up the CIB later. And then the last bullet here, shared assistance on other operating costs. It's not uncommon. You know, what you see at a lot of zoos is the city continues to pay the water bill. That's not a scenario that fits here because we've already broken that out. But at a lot of municipally owned zoos, they never installed meters. So it's one of those costs that the city sometimes pays. So there's a lot of different perspectives to approach this conversation from. I was hit with one at the zoo. We've literally been talking there about this since I got there in 2010. We've been talking about it more this year. What my staff wanted to know at a staff meeting is how will a public-private partnership help animal care at the zoo? And okay, that's their perspective. I think the perspective in this room tonight is, what's the financial perspective? What's this thing going to cost? Is it going to save money? Does it cost more than what it costs today? So, you know, this is one of those things where, will it save money? Let's start there. And this is one of those kind of, well, yeah, maybe. It will in the long run type of answers. So I'm going to kind of start to get into that. Because of some of the processes that we've already gone through, we are already experiencing savings from our current relationship with Friends of the Zoo. So the savings this time around may not be as great as you may expect. In the long term, however, there are, of course, savings, but that assumes that this is an organization that's going to grow. What's really important is that in the short term, you agree on a fee that is a win-win for both the new nonprofit operator and the current city general fund. So what am I really saying here? You may recall, or some of you may recall, some earlier conversations about different things that have transpired at the zoo. And so I'm going to kind of caveat this with the first year followed by the second year. So in the first year, 2012, things were tight. Funding issues were creeping up. So that was really the first time that Zoo Advisors was hired to do a governance study. But you know what? The timing wasn't just right. So instead, we took all of our guest service components, outsourced those to Friends of the Zoo. Now, in 2015, it's the same scenario. Things get tight. We take a look at our operating model. Is there a piece that we can outsource and capture some savings? And in 2016, we began outsourcing all of our seasonal staff to Friends of the Zoo. Most of our seasonal staff to Friends of the Zoo. And the same scenario in 2018. In 2018, we were looking at 2019, starting off the year, maintaining our consistent operation with about a $45,000 projection in the red. To that effect, we have kept a vacant position to this point, trying to capture those salary savings to offset it. But in 2018, we were seeing, okay, there's another funding challenge. Is there another piece that we can outsource to Friends of the Zoo to capture that savings? And we found one, and it's our seasonal education staff. But those things are getting harder to find. So as I was reviewing this presentation earlier today, I thought, what type of questions might people ask? And so I put together a little worksheet just for myself called Supplemental Information. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to refer to this, it might be easier if you all had a copy of it as well. So when I refer to the money that we've already saved, it's a little hard to understand. But if you look at the top box on this page, the column that starts with conservation expenses, these 5 items here, those are what I consider to be our direct savings. Those are items that the city no longer pays for, but Friends of the Zoo does. Now there's things like website, online store, marketing, printing, advertising. I didn't want to include those because it's really hard to say, you know, what's the right percentage. So I'm just talking about direct savings. So when we started outsourcing this stuff to Friends of the Zoo, that was the fall of 2013. So if you go over to the right, you'll see that at that time, the city was spending $80,000 on those things that we outsourced to Friends of the Zoo. And so on one hand, you can say that we save $80,000 a year. But if you look to the FOTS 2018 column, last year they spent $252,000 on those items because they can spend more than what we could budget to spend. If we would, the way our municipal budgeting worked in 2013 is the same way it works today. So sometime in 2012, we budgeted a number for, let's say, seasonal staff. And then 2013 rolls around. And if we were having a bumper year, we'd already budgeted a number. The type of financial model that Friends of the Zoo operates under, if we're having a bumper year, they spend more. They provide the quality level of service that our consumer base expects. So you can look at that as, well, it saved $80,000. or you can look at it as our nonprofit partner increased the product level of the consumer that comes to the zoo to a $250,000 savings that the city did not have to spend. So when I talk about the savings that we've already achieved, that's that box that I'm talking about. So, management fee. What is the management fee? How do you even start talking about a management fee? I'm going to make this slide look really simple and then complicate it on the one right after it. So here we go. So typically a management fee, you want to know if you're in the ballpark of will a private-public partnership make a difference. So you take the operating cost of the zoo, subtract the earned income. That's what the city, that's what the general fund is already spending to operate the zoo. And so if you can take that sum, give that sum to a nonprofit operator that operates in a different type of financial model than what a municipal government does. And if you remember this worksheet, take that $80,000 worth of savings and grow it. That's when the management fee starts to make sense. So the technical answer is that when the net cost of operating the zoo, when that net shortfall can fit into a combined operating model, then a public-private partnership begins to make sense for years moving forward. So I told you I was going to complicate this, right? So here it is. The black box in the center is what it costs to operate the zoo. It's that annual net cost of operations plus capital maintenance, because you've got facilities at a wide variety of ages. The Animal and Man Building opened in 1964. Camp Cowabunga opened last fall. And you've got everything in between. So you know that there is going to be some sort of capital maintenance needed. That's your cost for operating the zoo each year. The pink items on the right, that's our opportunity for earned income. It's your admission income, food, beverage, gift, program income. That's our education programming, our fee-based programs that we sell to people. Now, typically, the fee-based programs don't break even. Admission income and gift, food, and drink is where your real income centers are. Now, there's additional forms of funding as well. Those include contributed income. That's your private donations, a management fee in a public-private partnership, and typically some sort of capital improvement funding. We're not going to talk about that tonight because there's 1,000 different ways to do that. That almost deserves its own conversation at a later time. The oval that I left off of here, and it was unintentional, but it's that other public funding source. For this zoo, it equates to the countywide half-cent retailers sales tax. So here's the deal, kind of. That black box in the center, it's a known. The other items are variables. But what happens is the management fee and the admission income are a reflection of accessibility. So when I talk about we need to agree on a management fee that appropriately recognizes the partnership, we could say, well, let's look at this without doing any type of management fee. And I could turn around and say, okay, we're going to have to change our admission rate to about $41.25 per guest. Now, I don't know if anyone will come or how often they'll come. Or we can look at somewhere in the middle. But that accessibility rate or the management fee and admission income combined, one can go up and the other can go down to get that whatever that right number is. Like, if our goal was to decrease a management fee, then we probably look at additional admission rate increases to offset that, because the black box, unless we cut programs, the black box is what it is. So, why is now the right time? And I think this is the slide where the paradigm is going to start to shift for some of the people in the room. I got I guess it was an email last week from Tim Rencher. And it was, hey, we saw the council agenda. My editor wanted us, I don't even know if Tim's here tonight.
It's not.
Okay. My editor said, things are going good at the zoo. Why would they want to change it? Let's do a story about this. So we talked about the background. Things are going good at the zoo. But to a certain degree, that's because that's the picture that we paint. And I was born not just glass half full, but two-thirds full. So I'm the eternal optimist that we will find a way. And the reality is that this zoo is still in the same cycle that it's been in since the early 90s. And here's the deal, for lack of better words. Flat budgets are never flat. There's always costs that go up in a flat budget that result in you having less money to spend. And there's a bullet here that says the 15 to 20 year cycle. That's what I thought in my head, but when you look at the numbers, it was in the late 90s, it was in the late aughts. So it's about every 10 years, there's a cycle where funding has gotten tighter. And as funding gets tighter, you start to see a pattern of problems. And each of those cycles wound up in a consent agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture. Now, I was aware of that cycle when I came to this job. It's not uncommon. And because of that, we've taken a proactive approach to when we see funding challenges on the horizon, we have taken parts, outsourced them so that we could create that budget that we need to put towards our core programming. And the story that we're kind of at today, what really drove us to this issue coming up now, is that we're out of those options of continuing to outsource pieces. Those last two options are kind of veterinary care or me. And, it's not, this is not a blame thing. This is not, this is just this is where we are. And the good thing is that we've seen it coming. We've done the research. We've got an alternative. Even if this isn't the right alternative, now we're in the discussion. And that's what's important. So there's another bullet that's up there that says there isn't a crisis right now. And there's not. We can have a fair conversation about this process. But imagine if we would have taken this step forward in 2009, 2010, when the zoo was in a lot of chaos. That management fee that we're talking about, all of a sudden skews way heavy to the nonprofit operator, because the city at that point is trying to unload its liability. So for a municipal organization, the best time to take a look at this is when there's not a crisis that's going on. And I feel like it's kind of anticlimactic to mention the last bullet, but it is an industry best practice. So, but back to that thing, does this save money? If you pull out your supplemental sheet again, I did the exercise in the middle about the management fee. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million. I don't know if that's north or south. We're not to that detail yet. But I want to specifically take you to the bottom and that 4.74%. A reality that we haven't been able to escape from is that the expense to operate the zoo is going up each year by about 4.74%. And, we don't budget for emergencies. We don't budget for things we can't see. Last year, a couple of sick elephants in a boiler. I'd honestly have to go back and look at what the year was before. But the reality is, each year, on average, it's 4.74% more expensive to operate than it was the year before. Now, we hope that more people are coming, and we hope that the rate increase that we put into place last year helps offset that. But in terms of, does this process save money? It definitely, I'm not sure what I just did there. It definitely protects from that 4.74% more expensive each year that it gets to. So I'm going to try to go backwards here in a minute. That's why you don't set things on the keyboard. So one other thing just wanted to point out. This is something that, for the most part, I'm proud of personally. But it's at a point where it probably needs to change. And I think generally I have a reputation as a nice person until somebody sees this FTE chart. Since the time I started here, took the organization from 32 FTEs down to 22. We're back up to 24. And through that time continuum, people have seen nothing but increased product when they go to the zoo. And that's a reflection of the services that we have outsourced to Friends of the Zoo. And at the same time, you can see the trend line with attendance. We're definitely trending up in that direction. So this question, do public-private partnerships and zoos really work? That 2013 presentation that I mentioned says about 70% of the AZA accredited zoos have entered into one of these. We can update that in 2019 to about 75% of AZA accredited zoos. What we see with public-private partnerships and zoos is attendance, operating revenues, contributed revenue, and capital facility improvements all dramatically increase. And again, if you remember that $80,000 we saved from the municipal budget and what a nonprofit budget can do with that, that's what this speaks to. My favorite bullet on this side is something that we're probably still years away from talking about, but it's worth at least planting the seed, and that is, in some zoos that have gone through a public-private partnership, public sector funding declined in those zoos because they found homes in other regional funding initiatives. My personal opinion, and it's nothing more than that, is that property tax from the general fund is not the right way to fund this zoo today. We see over 200,000 people a year. 44% of those come from outside of Shawnee County. And while I can't give you a percentage of the 114,000 people that visit from inside Shawnee County, I know that they're not only City of Topeka residents. I don't have an answer from that. I don't want y'all to agree with me and not have a job tomorrow. It's just an observation that this is just a start. It's not a final solution. Another question that's come up is, how do we prevent failure? And I think, and again, I mean absolutely no offense by this. It was in 2009 that this topic was first recommended. I started in 2010 and went, holy cow. And it was every department in the city of Topeka, along with Friends of the Zoo, that helped turn the Topeka Zoo around. It took that entire team to get the zoo back on track. But this question, how do I keep? Oh, wow, really didn't want to go there. How do we prevent failure? You know, this is one of those things that most of us probably came into the room tonight thinking, okay, if we allow a nonprofit operator to operate our zoo, how are we going to prevent them from failing? This, I think, is where that paradigm finally shifts. It's our failure that we need to prevent. We have really maxed what we can do within the limits of the general fund. And if we don't recognize that and change something, and that change could be stopping growth at the zoo. It could be cutting zoo programs. I'm not saying that there's just one solution, but we're at a point where something needs to change. And so what would ensure success through a public-private partnership is through a really good written agreement between the partners. And that's when I bring back and stress that word partner. It's a well-balanced community representative board. It's having a long-term vision and a business plan, and it's in the agreement requiring AZA accreditation so that there's an outside independent accrediting body keeping an eye on your zoo. But what we do know is if we don't change our track, we know that cycle that we're in. So in terms of next steps, one obviously is to implement a communication plan. We didn't intend for our media to initiate that communication plan. Each of you guys should have a pretty book. In that book is a copy of a letter and an RSVP card. That letter was mailed May 15th to a number of our stakeholders at the zoo. We meet regularly with our staff. Moving forward, our hope is to increase the amount of communication that we do this. Next is provide for the employees. Now, we don't necessarily know what that looks like right now. But again, I would say we're not in a crisis. We can take the time and figure out how to best factor in our employees into this equation. Work towards a suitable management fee. I've mentioned that. And of course, define what action would need to be taken by the governing body. Catherine Walter has begun looking at that process. If this is something that collectively we move forward with, obviously she identifies that. Now, I know that it feels like we're getting towards the end, but I just want to say, but wait, there's more. Anyway, this is actually a billboard that we're testing, done by Bajillion, so I was curious to get your reaction to that. But there is more. So I told you that in this room, your perspective most likely is going to center around the numbers, and I get it. That's where mine centers around too. But let me ask you this question. Imagine what we could become. We're right on the heels of opening the zoo's largest project in its entire history. We're weeks away from taking 5 underprivileged kids, immersing them into our teen camps so that next summer we can hire them as some of our frontline leaders. Kay's Garden is currently under construction, down part of the pool today. We've got supporters that help bring in special exhibits to this zoo for the sake of our community. And we've got the stakeholder in place for our next major project after Kay's Garden, and we're pretty confident we've met the stakeholder for the project after that. So if I would have taken this approach to the conversation and said, look what we can do, and we're not going to impact the general fund any more than we are, look what we could become. This phrase, every choice, a change, that's our motto that we challenge all of the youth that we work with. We want every youth that we come into contact with to know that every choice they make is an opportunity to change our planet for the better. Right now, every choice of change, everyone in this room, the leadership team of the city of Topeka, our governing body, our nonprofit supporters, Friends of the Topeka Zoo, now is our opportunity to make a choice to positively change the zoo for the future. It's a complicated subject, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Brendan. At this point in time, do we have any questions? Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I ask Mr. Wiley, first of all, I'm a huge fan of yours. I mean, you've done great things for the zoo, and I really appreciate all that you and your staff have done.
Thank you.
I will tell you, I think this is going to be a little bit of a tough sell, just based on groups that I've met with since the news kind of broke. And I think it's because all of us have, there's maybe a certain amount of civic pride in our zoo. So I think when we start monkeying around, that might be a better term. Sorry. But, thank you.
That was good.
So I think that's, and when Mr. Gerber and Mr. Trout first talked to me a couple of weeks ago, that was my first thing. I'm like, it's our zoo. If there's just a certain amount of civic pride that I think all of us share in it. One of the things, though, that I was interested that I think Mr. Gerber brought up is there's a number of people that would donate to a zoo that wasn't municipally ran. Can you maybe speak to that as one of the reasons for?
Sure. And first, let me point out just a couple quick things. Thank you for the compliment, but I work with amazing people that do amazing things, and they're the ones that get it done. If there's a misconception, it's that we are not privatizing the zoo. That's not what we're suggesting. The city still owns the zoo. It's still the city's zoo. It actually has to be the city's zoo, so we don't have to worry about that. It's just a different operating model. But specifically to the fundraising piece, traditionally, it's the support organization that does a lot of the capital fundraising. A lot of us may remember a person that made a huge mark on this community, and it was Gary Clark. Well, Gary did a lot of the capital fundraising, and so he established that precedent that it's the zoo director that does the capital fundraising, which is great. But I have been at the table Fred Patton was at the table with me one night, made an ask, and the response was, infrastructure, that's the city's responsibility. And that ask was in line with Case Garden. It's just sometimes a mindset that, why would I donate to government? Now there's a flip side. I came here from a nonprofit animal shelter. So I'm used, well, it's been a while, but at one point in time I was used to kind of raising money around animal causes. There are a number of different strategies to raise funding for animal health, for animal food, but when you're a government employee and you make that ask, it implies that the city can't take care of its own animals. If you're a nonprofit representative, for whatever reason, it's received entirely differently.
Councilwoman Ortiz, to be followed by Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. Brendan, I too will compliment you because without a good head, the body can't follow, and you've been that good head. And I think one of the reasons why we hired you, we had a bad time at the zoo. I'm just going to keep it real there. And when we hired you, part of your resume said that you took the Kansas City Zoo, I believe it was, from a government entity to a nonprofit, and I think that's what we were looking at. And so this has been in the works for a long time. So my first question would be, have you done this before?
Sure. To your first question, I was on staff at the Kansas City Zoo when the Kansas City Zoo entered into a public-private partnership with the city of Kansas City, Missouri. That was a lot of years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of the window opened, organization jumped through it, a lot of lessons learned. In the nonprofit world, I worked at for lack of a better expression, and it no longer exists, so I'll say this, at a hole-in-the-wall animal shelter. But we had a magnificent program. And so merger talks came up. And that shelter was two different occasions evaluating merging with other programs. Interestingly enough, it was something like 60 days after I left, they finally merged. I had no idea I was the one in the way. But so I've seen these types of organizational changes from a couple of different perspectives. I will tell you that from the staff at the zoo, this was a hard sell. Some of them got it. Younger keepers get it. Or I was a young keeper once, they don't care, is what it relates to. Zoo staff got it when we opened Camp Cowabunga and didn't increase any staff. That's when it made sense to them.
Well, and if I may,
yes,
Madam Mayor, and the reason why I said that is because I think that would be important to help with some pros and some cons. Back then when we had this discussion, Friends of the Topeka Zoo were not in a position to be that right partner because of some things that a report showed, which I would like for our council members to have that report to look at it. And I know we got new board members, and I think they're thinking outside the box. They've done a better job of doing a lot of things that we weren't doing before. For example, people thought when you made your payments to the Friends of the Friends of the Topeka Zoo, when you bought those passports, they thought that money was going back into the zoo, and a lot of it wasn't. And so they were upset with that. But I think we are past that, and they've done a better, this board has done a better job of doing that. I spoke with City Manager Trout, and I said, we really need to clarify what we're doing here. Because a lot of people, when the press came out, thought that we were giving up our zoo, and people were upset about that. And I told him, we have to make it clear of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and show the people that, because I think that's where some confusion was. You're giving the zoo away, you're giving the zoo away, why are you doing that, you know? Because there is a lot of people that take pride in our zoo and where we were and where it's become now. And then at that time, there was a deed or a contract, and I tried to call Lisa on a couple occasions, and I didn't get her, but or maybe Mary Feeney has it. But we need to make that clear that we're not giving it away, because in that deed or contract, it says if we do, then it goes back to the heirs, and I think people were thinking about that. So those are some of the things that we need to make clear to the public when we look at that. And I agree that there's only certain grants that you can get being a nonprofit that city entities can't get. So I would like to study this. I do have a couple more questions that I'd like to talk to you about. But I would just like to know what's going to be the hardest part on this, you know, because I looked on here and it said most or all of our employees. So that doesn't tell me who will become a part, and I don't know if that's a part of our agreement or what. Because I know with the when we merged the Parks and Recs, you know, with the county, and people are very upset about it today. That's no secret, and I think that's what they're kind of thinking. Is this another merge? Are we going to have a lot of mad employees? Blah 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 blah. And so that would be something for me that I would want to know. I would like to know about all of the assets that we do have. When you say the city would maintain ownership of the assets, I really need to know, like, what do you mean? The maintenance part of it, what does that entail?
Sure.
And where does that leave us now with our projects that we have ongoing? Will the fonts pick that up, or are we expected to carry that out? Just what is our agreement looking like? That's some of the questions that I have. And I don't know if you want to answer it now or you want to get back to me, that's fine. And last but not least, I want to thank Friends of the Topeka Zoo for thinking outside of the box, and we're still having movies there. And there's another one, I believe, July 25th, is that correct?
Third Thursday in July?
Whatever the third Thursday in July is.
And these are the things that people want to see, I know it was kind of skeptical getting it started, but when we had over 1,000 people there, they're like, whoa, maybe we ought to keep doing this. So that's what I'll be looking for. Thank you.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Deputy City Manager can answer a little bit of those questions for Councilwoman Ortiz now.
Deputy City Manager.
Madam Mayor, thank you. The answer, Councilwoman Ortiz, is that there is not yet an agreement. And when the city manager and I met with the council members and mayor, when we were able to meet with those folks, what I told them was, we're trying to get this far enough down the road so that it's baked, but not so far down the road that it's a done dish, so there's still time to throw extra ingredients in there and get all the things in there that we need. And so some things like, what employee goes where and what they're paid and what the benefits will be. Those things have all been thought about by Brendan and the FOTS folks, but they're not fully developed yet. So if we sense that there's support for this process, then we will begin fine-tuning that agreement so that we can bring something back for further consideration.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I guess I would need to see that to know whether I want to consider it or not. because right now I don't know whether to consider it or not, because I don't know what we're baking here. I don't know what ingredients you got. I don't know if I like it.
If I might add.
Yes, Brendan.
And we're just getting started. I shouldn't say it that way. We've been talking about it for 9 years, but we're really just getting started with the details in the communication, and it occurs to me, Jared and I respect each other. We get along extremely well. He is excellent at his job. If a public-private partnership was to take place, there's typically only one person whose role changes, and that is the role that Jared's in. The same people do the same things at the same place, but under one leader. And I just want to make sure that's clearly understood, and hope that answers some questions. It's still your zoo with the same people doing the same things, but with more opportunity to improve the place and grow the place for the future.
Councilman Jensen, to be followed by Councilman Padilla.
So I will say, with a name like Brendan, it has to be good. So whatever we're getting is going to be fantastic. I appreciate that you take a look at everything with a two-thirds glass full mentality. I think that's an excellent perspective to look at one part of this. I look at everything from a disaster recovery point of view. And not that this is a bad thing at all, but I want to look at all of the scenarios as many as we can predict as to where it would fail and try to plan around them. I think your point about we need to have a good, solid written agreement is absolutely excellent, and it's critical to the success of this, because as part of going through that exercise, we need to look at what are the issues that can cause this not to be a success. I think this is an excellent idea. It's clearly a national trend. I've done a little bit of research on how some other communities have done that. And I think you're right, the timing is correct. My fear is that we're setting up a situation where at some point in the future, the entire cost for the zoo is going to be handed to FOTS. And I'm interested to know if, when that happens, because invariably I think it will, budgets are just going to get tighter. That's an unfortunate reality of life. And our community's capacity to pay more is in many cases just not there. So given that that is an eventual reality, I would be interested to see how FOTS is going to be able to handle the entire total cost for everything at the zoo and what it's going to take to do that. My fear is that that's going to happen, and we need to be prepared for it, as well as any other contingency plans you guys might have as part of that. I'm absolutely interested in seeing where this go, and I sincerely hope that it doesn't happen where the city is no longer able to contribute something to that. But I just want to see, are we prepared for what we could consider the worst case scenario and how we would handle that. I think working backwards from a disaster often teaches you a lot of lessons that I think would go well in this operating agreement, and making sure that both sides are prepared to contribute to make this the best regional zoo we could possibly have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. Taking something from Councilman Emerson and from Brendan, which is a wonderful name. My mind is open to the idea. There are some things that I would ask to give some real thought to. It's, for me, in my mind, I almost see it like sometimes a new company merger. Everybody's going to be happy. The same employees are going to be there. Typically, that doesn't work out. Some employees leave for one reason or other. So I want to make sure that those details are given an awful lot of thought, because like you say, you work with amazing people. You want to make sure you do everything you can to retain them as long as you can. And for me, it's a little, like what Council Emerson says, I see it as our city zoo, and I think the citizens of Topeka see it that way. And I know from most comments that I hear from citizens about anything in the city, it's the city's either great idea or it's the city's fault. So regardless of who's governing that entity like the zoo, there will be people who will expect the city to have some responsibility to correct things, make things happen. And so I kind of like the idea of being able to say, city manager, right now, under the agreement that we have, who does what? Who makes those decisions? Where does the governing body's authority or the city manager's authority cover certain aspects and operations, and where does it not? And then how would that change under the new proposed governance? So having more information about that and those devil in the details kinds of things would be helpful to me, but my mind's open to the idea. It's just those are the kinds of things I think the citizens will be interested in as much as I am. And thank you for your work. I enjoy going out there to the zoo all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
So I'll chime in because I've made my remarks public, but I don't know if the rest of the council knows where I stand on this. So I love your leadership so much. Your positivity and everything that you've been able to bring about on the zoo is just absolutely phenomenal. I also want to take a second before I go any further and recognize Representative Patton because it's always great to have our friends here. I know that you're not here in your government capacity, but it's also nice to just have you here because we know who you are, aside from Mr. Zoo in your second life. So the only concerns that I have is the fact that I understand that contractually, it's very easy for us to say, hey, right now, we're going to divide up the maintenance and do a maintenance fee, and this is what we're going to do. And then we are going to do our part. However, in difficult times, as we've seen with another private partnership that we have with another organization in our community, as soon as the budgets go up and things get tight, because of that partnership with the city, then the city ends up having, and these council members end up having an inordinate amount of pressure from the constituency saying, please, please, please don't let our asset die. And at that point in time, that contract language and that partnership sometimes becomes very null because you end up having the pressure of understanding that, yes, this is what we're agreeing to. However, the pressure that the public exerts on all of us to start then doing the rescue work because something happened is very real, and it's something that as we move forward, I want us to remember. And I say this because that's a situation that we have with TPAC right now. We have an agreement. We had a number that we had agreed upon because at the point in time in which more than likely when we did this contract, everything was going amazingly with TPAC. But then as years passed, things got difficult with the organization, and we have seen a difference in ebb and flow on what the request really is. Sometimes it's an amount, sometimes it's more. And one of the calls that I've had is I absolutely support and love TPAC, and absolutely it needs community support. But what we need to know as a community is what's the right number, because we also need to ensure that the organization that is running TPAC is doing the job. So my fear is what happens in 10 years when Mr. Wiley decides that he's going to retire. You're laughing, but it's a reality. And when that transition of leadership occurs, are those successes going to be able to be maintained? And it's a fair question. It's an absolutely fair question. What happens when our executive director of FOTS retires? He has been amazing. Fundraising. Right now, we bring in 2.1, and the expectation is that more than likely we're going to keep on bringing in 2. The operation of the zoo is somewhere around almost $5 million, which is half of the budget currently. That's a lot of money. That's $2 million that we are putting in, and we're expecting FOTS not only to bring 2, but keep on bringing in additional funds. We have some loose ends, like Councilwoman Ortiz said. We have the funding, the $10 million that we approved for additional expansion. So that again falls on money that the city is doing right now. The other concern that I have is we have a community that's super generous. I mean, Topeka, for not being one of those coastal cities that has a whole bunch of billionaires running around, Topeka has a few people that work very hard for their dollars, but they have a huge heart, and they are willing to put their dollars where their passion is at. And my concern is, I know that we're going to be looking at other regional grants, but I don't want us to say in the city, oh, okay, so you're not going to support us directly, so we're going to privatize this, and then we're going to start asking for more money from these individuals that are already committed to all these things that are happening, and then we're going to find ourselves in a difficult spot. So with all of that being said, I'm not saying that I'm not supportive of the transition. What I'm saying is that I think that we really have to sit down and take a look at how would we work to ensure that not only the city is and the constituents' dollars are being protected in the process, but most importantly, in the same breath, because they're equally important, how we continue making our zoo being the best that it could be, because it's got limitless potential. There's so many things that are happening right now. So I think that what I think that you've heard from Councilman Jensen, from Padilla, from Emerson, from Councilwoman Ortiz, and from me is we're not saying no, 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 no. I think that the concern is how do we ensure that we've learned from maybe challenges in the past and that we safeguard the city? How do we ensure that this is going to be successful number-wise for the zoo as we move forward, and just making sure that we're making the right decision? Because I know that these are decisions that it's easy for us to say we'll go back, or it's easy for us to say, hey, here's what we wrote in the contract. But I can tell you from past experiences that we've had organizations that may not be functioning the way that they're supposed to, and we're still giving them money. So this is not a trend that I would like to continue, and I want to make sure that as we move forward through this, that we're doing it very deliberately so that we make this a success.
Absolutely.
Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to certainly give kudos to the zoo as well as to give you credit for bringing this at this point. I think this is a big discussion to have, and so introducing it really early and getting the feedback from us and it's public so that I'm certain there'll be more feedback and thoughts from the public as well. I share the various comments that came up about being careful with it, but there is an appeal. I mean, well, I can speak for myself, but I think what we all want is for the zoo to fly. Mm-hmm. And government isn't built that way. And so to let you fly, what is the best structure? The mayor brings up good examples about TPAC. We've also, in terms of looking at models, have been talking about our economic development incentives and making sure that those require the developers to maintain at a top level throughout the life of their agreements, so we don't have something that's 20 years old that we've helped take to another level and then it's worn out by the time is up, those sorts of things. I do think most of us have watched nonprofits from one vantage point or another. It is easier for them to, well, in my experience, they need that operating subsidy. That's harder to come by than the capital project money, even capital revitalization money. And so thinking about that really pragmatically, giving, and then there's a matter of the control. If we still own it, then is it better if you own it, or how do you structure that? But I can see those capital opportunities being strong for you, and as you mentioned, stronger than for us. So I too am really open, and thanks again for conceptualizing and bringing it forward, and open to helping to take it around.
Thank you.
Councilman Lesser, to be followed by Councilman Mays. No? My bad.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First question is, if this transition was to take place, would you transition to being a FOTS employee? Would you stay in the city? How would that work out?
The way I think it would work best is if I transitioned to be a Friends of the Zoo employee. I think that top leader needs to be employed by the governing authority of the organization. So I would transition to FOTS in that zoo director role. Now, Today, that's typically an executive director or chief executive officer role. We haven't gotten to the part yet of kind of what would that organization chart look like, but we'll definitely have that done by the time we come and speak to you next. I realized I wasn't probably as direct as I should have been earlier. Unfortunately, Jared's in that chair that he no longer becomes the executive director, but he will definitely serve in an incredibly valuable role.
Thank you. You know, I'm a big fan of yours, and I don't think it's happened by accident where the zoo has gone from when you came here to where we are today as recently as event I was at this weekend. And I believe in people. I need to know if we did move forward, and I still want to obviously evaluate a lot of this stuff, but I need to know what your commitment is to that. Because I would not be interested in moving forward at this point in time with someone else. So, or even worse, starting the process and having to do that. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask what your commitment is to that.
Sure.
You're asking for my commitment. I'm
right.
Asking what yours is.
So, funny story here. The Friends of the Zoo Board has heard, and we kind of have a little, myself, Doug, Jackie, Catherine, they've also heard, you know, my personal opinion is this is the right thing to do. And if I'm the one that's in the way, solve that problem. There's great future leaders in the zoo industry. And it's my opinion that another successful leader can be found. So I don't remember what I said about the merger. I don't want to be in the way of the right thing happening. So that's the flip side to that. But you asked, so I'll answer your question. When I started here, I don't know, first week, maybe had a staff meeting with our staff, and somebody said, well, what's your plan? And I said, you know, I think in 5-year blocks, ask, you know, let's see where we are in 5 years. And there was a lot of unpopular reaction to that. And so I countered with, but we don't plan on being the same organization 5 years from now than what we are today. And how do you know I'm going to be the right person then? So 5 years rolled around, and we had another staff meeting and said, okay, so 5 years have gone by. What do we think? I'd still like to be your leader if you're still willing to have me. And here's some of the things that we want to accomplish in the next 5 years. And it's funny that I've been realizing I'm coming up on that next 5 years and hoping that I'm still the right person for this job, because I've never been in a better role, in a better community. And we've got a lot of plans, and I'd love to see more of those happen. So I have to caveat this with, haven't had that conversation with our staff next year yet. But when I have it with them, they're going to hear that I want to be with them for another 5 years.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, seeing that there's no other questions or comments, I just want to say thank you for, yes.
I'm sorry, can I provide one more answer to
No.
Councilmember Leslie? That's what I want. We do have a staff person that has a different plan. He wants my job. It's not Jared. Well, Jared may too, I don't know. But we've got a guest service manager. His name is Bobby. He went and had a conversation with Gary Clark one day, and was the question, how can I be a zoo director? And so we hired him. Jared hired him. I use we really loosely. And so Gary Clark runs into Bobby at the zoo one day, And he asked me to come over there. He said, "This kid wants your job." And I said, "Great. You got to wait a while to take it." But yeah, it's just a great place to be, great people to work around. Wouldn't want it any other way.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
I want to respond to that. I've known Bobby since he was a little kid. And his dream has always been to be a zoo director. And he's gone to every camp out there ever since he was a little kid. He doesn't want to steal your job, but he wants that job. So I want to make that clear, that he doesn't want to steal it. And Bobby is like so committed. You know, you meet those little kids and they want to be a police officer or something. That's what he's always wanted to do. And he's a very good zookeeper. But he doesn't want to steal it, Brendan. But he does want your job.
Yes, he does.
And that's in his goal.
Yep.
That's in his goal. So, and I think he's a very qualified zookeeper. I'm not saying I'm trying to give it to him or nothing like that. I'm just saying, but you can't, because that's how much he loves where he's at, and he grew up out there. He's went to all the camps.
And it shows.
And it shows. It shows. When the zookeeper got hurt, I was like, oh my God, where's Bobby? Because I've known him since he was a little kid, and that's all he's talked about. You know, and but he loves you, Brendan. He does love you. He doesn't want to steal it, but he that is in his eye. That is in his eye. So just know that. I just want to make that clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the presentation. This just seems like the beginning of many conversations to come, and a lot of data and a lot of public discourse. I appreciate that we're having this conversation early out in the open so that our constituents are able to listen, and as they typically do, will provide feedback. So we will check our emails and phone calls after this is done, because I know that we're going to get a lot of information from them, and we will continue talking. Thank you for your leadership.
Mayor, thank you. City Manager.
All right. Can't believe that it's 7:42 and we are to announcements. I know we have an executive session, but it's announcements. Ooh. So if the clerk would read starting the announcements.
We have the preliminary June 11th, 2019 governing body agenda. We have a couple action items. One is an ordinance for Charles and Margarita Lopez. We have a public hearing and an ordinance for a special assessment at Southwest 49th Street and Wanger Road. A resolution for initiation of eminent domain proceedings for the Grant Jefferson Pump Station. We have approval of the 2020 transient guest tax allocations in the amount of $2,854,458. A public hearing and resolution for the water AFSCME labor agreement impasse. And then we have two non-action items: discussion on the dynamic core redevelopment TIF district, and we have a discussion on the 2015 Uniform Mechanical Code and backflow cross-connection ordinances.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few announcements this evening. First one is the fire department won the Battle of Badges. 62 pints of blood were donated, but the fire department got the most votes. The fire department is hosting a camp called Camp Courage, which is a camp for high school girls. The camp will be from June 24th to the 28th. You can apply on the City of Topeka webpage under the TFD heading. A couple of other announcements. We have the police department is, of course, diligently preparing for the Kicker Country Stampede event that's coming up in a couple of weeks. I mentioned to you in another email that we are postponing the work on the Gary Ormsby Road in order to allow that route to continue. Obviously, we'll do what maintenance we can to make that as good a road as possible while we have this delay. Unfortunate, but having that access is very important. We can't have everybody come down one road. Obviously, we have many code compliance issues we're working right now on homes and for high grass. We, of course, want to remind everyone that If you see a location that needs attention, make sure you either use C-Click-Fix or call it in, 368-3111, in order to provide us that information so that we can address the particular location. Last one is the municipal court is starting to gear up for Clean Slate Day, which will be September 20th. If you're interested in volunteering, please contact the court services, Judge Lori Bishel, or one of her staff members if you're interested in volunteering. So that's all I have.
All right. Well, Topeka, get ready. This is the month of parties in the city. We have the NHRA here. This year, we're going to have the Country Stampede, which is a pretty huge event. We're having the NHRA. Topeka's a happening, and this Friday is First Friday as well. So if you're looking for something to do, figure out what's happening in the community. We have a really cool calendar called Topeka 365. And we hope that as you start learning about all of the events that are happening in our community, like Lindsay DeBon from Ford says, I hope that all of you get FOMO, which is fear of missing out, of being in all of the events that we have in our city, the city of FOMO, Topeka. Wanted to let everybody know that we have a new intern in the mayor's office. His name is Ian Trapp. I'm pretty proud to say that he's a Washburn student. He's studying political science, and he happens to be the quarterback of the football team. Sharp young man, shows up every day, ready to work, just amazing. Our Harvard intern started as well today, Rodrigo. So we had lunch, I took the interns to lunch, and we went to the row house. I think I horrified them because I brought my daughters, and we were all laughing. But it was a great time. I want to thank them for choosing to work with our city. I think it's pretty cool that, we have somebody from Harvard here that sent me a text message first thing in the morning saying, oh my God, I'm living in the Kansan Tower and my view of the Capitol is awesome. So Topeka is a great place to be. One of the things that Ian is working on is 2020, April 1st, April Fool's Day, I'm not joking. The census is gonna start, going into action. And it's something that is extremely important for all of us to take into account because our city is able to benefit from certain things depending on the size that we have of populace in our community. A lot of people sometimes don't get into the reporting themselves and their families in the census, and I think it's important for us to do that. This year, the census is going to be able to happen online, and there's going to be a large number of individuals that may have challenges getting in and working through the census process. There's going to be a committee that is going to be formed by the mayor. Apparently, this happens every 10 years. So Wolgas got to skip this one. Bunton had it, and now it's my turn. So there's, in this committee, I think that, of course, the council has to be a part of it because you all communicate with your districts so that we could somehow figure out ways of engaging the library. And there's going to be many other organizations that are going to be involved in this. So in your own right, as you're listening from home, if this is something that you want to make sure that you participate in, it's important for your community to make sure that every single citizen is counted. Want to thank the council. While I feel like we were talking, I feel like it's been a month since I've been out of here because we had the trip and then I had surgery and then we had the week off. So it's just been like a long time, but the council was very kind to me and sent me flowers, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge them for the loss of my grandmother. That was absolutely beautiful, as well as Councilwoman Ortiz on her own right. I love you guys. Also wanted to do my condolences today. Ms. Nechama Rivlin, which is the wife of the president of Israel, passed away today unexpectedly, a day before her 74th birthday. She was highly beloved in her state, in her country. And from Topeka to our friends in Israel, we want to tell you that our prayers and our thoughts are with you and with President Rivlin through this difficult time. Can't imagine how difficult it must be. I had a few notes, I'm sorry, let me read this here really quick. I want to also acknowledge our public safety team. I want to let this community know that finding out that because of the challenges that Manhattan is having, the fact that within 20 days, our team in the city has had to prepare to work through the Stampede, because yes, it is a point of pride that, we're going to be able to host this event this year that we did not expect. But with the surprise also comes an additional stress on our police force, on our fire force, on our hospitals, on our hotels, on our restaurants, that we are now preparing rapidly to ensure that we're able to be welcoming and ready for anything that happens and any needs. Our staff has been super nimble. And I want to say thank you to all of you, because this was a happy news, but at the same time, it was just like, oh my gosh, we have 20 days to get ready and even visit Topeka as they're trying to prepare these like visitors guides, and this is where you go and this is what you do and this is how you get there. It is a big deal. So thank you to the Greater Topeka Partnership and everybody that's just like working together so that when we have our visitors here in our community, that they feel at home and know where to go and everything occurs without a hitch. And the last thing I'll say is a funny, Chief, you might have won the Battle of the Badges, but I tell you what, Chief Cochran won the Transformation Award in the video. So, Councilman Emerson.
Nothing, Mayor.
Nothing, Councilman Padilla.
To follow up on that with Chief Duke, thank you, Mayor. I don't know if you all got a chance to look at that link of that video that they put out on YouTube. Excellent job, I think, in reaching out to the Spanish-speaking community to help them get their alarms in.
Mike, your mic.
Mike's on. Anyway, it was an excellent job. I think that's a really good community outreach piece that is fun to watch. The other thing is, and I'll offer this, Mayor, I'm sure that's already been included. When I was at State of Kansas with ABC, ABC was a big part of that enforcement team for the Country Stampede. So if they have not yet been asked to join, I'm certain that they would be more than glad to offer what assistance they can. They can bring agents from across the state to help on that. I enjoyed the German Fest, had a good time down there, met a lot of people that I see from year to year. And that is just a fun thing to go to. A lot of friends. I saw Mr. Ledbetter there in ball cap and T-shirt. But I want to thank everybody for all the things that they're trying to do for the city. June 7th, if you'll look to that, if you haven't received an invitation to a forum that's being held at the Poses Education Center on the topic of gun violence. And it's called a group intervention initiative to try and look at gun violence and how a community can think of different strategies to help the reduction of gun violence in their communities. So they have a good lineup of candidates there, or panelists, I'm sorry, candidates, I keep thinking about Emerson, of participants. So show up if you can. I think it'll be a pleasant morning and have lunch as well. So thank you again.
Councilman Jensen.
So a couple of weeks ago, we lost another historic building in downtown, and that's a huge tragedy for our community, for the families that had a business there. It was a sad event. I went down there just to see what I could see, and what I found when I got there was a truck from the water department. I didn't expect to see a water department truck there at all. I mean, I assumed it would just be firefighters and police. And as I looked around, it was fascinating to see all of the teams that had come together to make this massive fire event to try and to say what they could and make it as less impactful on the surrounding buildings as possible. Our city had a huge team that responded to that, and they worked flawlessly together. AMR was there in case somebody needed medical attention. The Red Cross was en route very shortly. The police were there to direct traffic. There were a ton of spectators there, but it looked to me like they were all being very respectful and letting the firefighters work. It was really fascinating to see that part of city staff and how they all pulled together to address a tragedy as best they could with the resources that our community has given them. And it was really, it's a mixed blessing to see something like that. It's a tragedy that we lost that building and those folks lost that business. But at the same time, it's wonderfully reassuring to know that our city has the team in place it takes to fight a tragedy like that with everything we've got and prevent it from destroying an entire city block. instead of just a single building. So I want to publicly thank, everybody that was involved in that, because it was quite, and you don't get to prepare for that. You can train and train and train, but that will never get you ready for every single scenario you could possibly run into. And the way those folks came up with an attack plan, positioned the apparatus and equipment, and leveraged our city assets to make that as a best job they could, it was really quite impressive. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Happy June, everyone.
Councilman Cohen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Is there anything that we can do as a city council to help roll out the red carpet for this big event, this country stampede? Let's figure out what we can do to make Topeka shine. I mean, so many people are going to be here, and they're going to leave a lot of money in our community, and it's something that we shouldn't really take very lightly. And I also wanted to, commend Chief Cochran, because after their friendly banter at the beginning of that video, he grew to be 6'5", 270 or something like that. And that was really fun to watch. So anyway, thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Lesser?
I just wanted to say congratulations to my alma mater, the Seaman Vikings, and Coach Steve Bushnell on his 9th state championship, back-to-back state championships. Who knows, if my other alma mater, Washburn, would have hired him, we'd maybe made the NCAA tournament this year, but who knows, we'll see.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple quick things. First, people have mentioned Country Stampede. Shout out to Chris Payne for stepping up. He is a real gem in this community, and I'm excited about us stepping forward to help do everything we can to welcome them. Appreciate all of our law enforcement and other support folks, but it takes somebody putting that together, and I know he was eager to see Heartland Park have the capacity. We've had the capacity to host big events like that, but we haven't done it, and so I'm really excited about that. I wanted to follow up a little bit on the presentation that we had from the ladies right at the beginning of the meeting about gun control. You saw me go out and visit with them. I wanted to refresh the council, or those that don't know it, as well as the city manager, that roughly 5 years ago, we did have local gun control in Topeka. And we as a council worked very hard with the citizens to figure out what the right balance was for us in this community. And we worked with law enforcement as well. I mean, there was a lot of conversation, and we'd worked out our local gun control ordinance. And within about a year, the state took away our authority to have our local control. And I would like to suggest, as I suggested to those ladies, that if we can bandwidth internally in the city or with others and simply ask this legislature to give us back our local control about gun control, can make a difference for us here in the city. Doesn't mean no guns necessarily, but let us control how we manage it. Let our law enforcement be part of the discussion about and the decisions about how we're going to handle it. So just wanted to throw that out. I too wanted to promote the Healing Gun Violence session on Friday, and also recommend that on Monday, the SCENT program from Highcrest is promoting a program by the author of Toxic Charity, which is a wonderful book that's very insightful about charity in a certain sense, to make sure that when we do things for people, whether it's money or actions in their neighborhoods or with their families, that we are doing it with them and supporting them, not doing it for them or doing it to them. And that session on Monday is a two-part. It's from 8 to 3:30. But there's a morning session that's on reimagining charity, and then an afternoon session that tags on that to walk through a more appropriate charity paradigm. So whether somebody's with a group or wants to look at community-wide, I think that's going to be really insightful for people, and kudos to SCENT for bringing that to us. And my understanding also, this is just the week for that, is that the day after that, Neighborhood Relations is doing our next neighborhood university for both staff and for neighborhood, established neighborhood leaders here. So a big time to up our game in terms of taking care of each other in our community. And that's it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
couple of things. I too wanted to recognize and thank all the people that was at the fire, but what impressed me too was the next day, the day after, the building was gone. And I said, how did they do that so fast? And so that was wasn't that code that was behind that? A very good job to them also for getting that down and out for the safety. Sunflower Girls, I was reading here, they are sponsored by American Legion Auxiliary, and they're dedicated to educating women about the inner workings of government, and they are coming to visit Topeka on Friday, and they're going to different parts of the government, and I'm going to be meeting with them, and so is Liz and Trey, and they have questions about council, and I'm going to see what I can tell them, and thought that was pretty cool that they were coming. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz? Okay, seeing no comments, we proceed to the public comment session of the evening, and the first individual signed up to speak is Connie DeHart.
My name is Connie DeHart. I've been a homeowner in Seabrook neighborhood for over 20 years, District 9. Right now, tonight, I'm talking about my street, Southwest Mountain View Drive, from 17th Street Terrace to 21st. It's a 4-block area. Last week, I took my yardstick and I took pictures of the big potholes in the street, not the small ones. I didn't measure them, I'd still be there. I just used my yardstick for comparison to show how big the holes are. My husband and I used to ride our bikes in the summer evenings, but we quit because of all the holes in the road. We also walk our dogs every night. We try to avoid the potholes so we don't twist our ankles and possibly fall. In that 4-block area, our curbs are crumbling, mud flows in the street. The street is so uneven, the water doesn't flow into the sewers. A few of the sewers are crumbling or so clogged with debris they don't drain. We have 2 businesses on our street. Daryl's Service comes down the road in their heavy tow trucks, and Swims and Sweeps has a warehouse on the street. We don't have alleys, we don't have sidewalks, so we all use the street. I don't know when the last time our street had work. We do get the occasional shovel full of asphalt, but it's a temporary fix that quickly corrodes again. I know we have main streets that need to be repaired, so I'm just asking that maybe we could get our street on a plan so we know there's a fix coming down our road. So I know you guys can't really see these, but this is the yardstick, and these are pictures to show how big these potholes are. I mean, they're big. And this is our curb, our crumbling curb. Anyway, I mean, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for your comments. Next person signed up to speak is Mr. Henry McClure.
Good evening, Henry McClure. Like your analogy about the cooking. That was good. Also, I'm going to text you a picture of what's outside my bedroom now because I now live above the College Hill Pizza Pub. Otto's Dispensary, when it was first built, was a German fella, and he built a 2,000 square foot home up above his pub. And I sold my home. It's in the process of being sold so I can manage a business that I own. And so now I'm going to be living in a neighborhood. And what I think has happened here with the Bark Park is too many chefs in the kitchen. And before we put this in the oven and create a disaster, we got to just take a step back and put the brakes on. And what I really want to happen is that we really step back and evaluate the process of how we got where we are today and take another look at it. Because tomorrow, the guy that invests in the guy that manages the complex, that the guy that's bought that manages and operates about 3,000 apartment units now in our community, that investor could just pull the plug on him and he could be out tomorrow. he's not the owner of it. He might have a piece of the deal, but he's not the money. It's the 5-hour energy guy. And that's why we've got to record the development agreement. And so tomorrow, if somebody else is looking at it, we don't get in the same situation. I'm going to ask the county to do it. I just don't think it was Henry McClure's responsibility personally to have that development agreement recorded. It's interesting we found out that Wheatfield's development agreement wasn't recorded, but I got to try to find a kinder, gentler way to get my point across. If you've ever read any of my emails, you know I can't articulate my thoughts into writing. There's something that short circuits when I'm thinking and typing and trying to figure out how to make money at the same time. But at least from now, what I don't want to happen is to have this guy put any money into it, and then we say, well, look, he did it, now we got to keep approving him. It's a bark park today. I see it now. I mean, there's one guy that goes over there and throws the ball and his dog runs around. And now my dog, Charlie Wilson, had to clean up after him. He's using it. But as a developer, you know, I have to hear all the time of, hey, don't do that in my neighborhood. But the reason we don't want this in my neighborhood is because of the economic impact to the community. We've got to fund the shortfall in the TIF bonds. And this is where the chefs missed the boat of not representing the economic impact of this. And this is where we've got to save it today. We got to put the brakes on it, and let's eventually get something built on that pays taxes or generates some sales tax. And I want to invite you guys to come down. And I don't know about this gun control thing, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that neighborhood. We're dodging bullets down there. So let's continue to stay the course down at College Hill and make it a better place. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your
Good night.
comments. The next person signed up to speak is Ms. Teresa Miller.
You all can look at them while I'm talking. They're in order of how we're going to talk about these documents. And one for you, so you know what I'm talking about. As I talk to you about these documents, I will try to cover all basics. I'm Teresa Miller. I am past president of North Topeka West NIA, but I had 3 projects that I told them I would stay on and finish, and this is one of them. Back in August of 2018, we were given a special empowerment grant. In order to get this grant, I had to get a letter or permission from, first I was told Westar for the utility poles. When I called Westar, the representatives from Westar, they told me, yes, there are poles, but they're actually, the city's paying for them, so you have to have permission from the city. So I said, okay. So I was turned on to Tim in planning. Tim turned me on to Mike Hall. Mike Hall ended up dealing with somebody named Jeff Hunt. But in all that process, supposedly the permission was given to me, or I would not have had the grant, to put the banners on the pole. So I got the green light. So National Night Out in August, I had Carol Bradbury bring the materials, and our neighborhoods painted all that wonderful material, and out of that material, we picked 4 banners of everybody's artwork. Then we decided, out of the 4 banners, which one we wanted to put up. So we went through all this. And in the process, I was getting emails. good deal, still going on, blah, 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 blah. I have a half an inch thick of emails and correspondence. Okay, and in the process, then I was told by Carol Bradbury that we needed to get a city contract. That first one that you have in front of you is only 4 pages. That's what I was sent by Neighborhood Relations from the person that we deal with. She only sent us every other page, and that was the document. I'm going, that was strange. I didn't think anything about it. We were so excited we got the document in. Yeah, this is the legal thing, and this is what we're going to do. So now we could actually make the banners and get them up. So then now I found out. So today I went and got the actual document, which is 7 pages long. And in this document, as far as I'm concerned, is a legal document with our city. They signed it, we signed it, that it gives me permission to put the banners on the poles. I have been told no, we're back to square one. We gotta talk to some guy named Jeffrey and get 45 more days to even see if we could order our banners. It's almost a year. Why is this going on? This is not the first project I've had a problem with this. And I called city manager's office last week. Couldn't get through anybody. I was told, take out the information, they'll get back with me. I called Friday, they'll get back with me. Nobody's got back with me. This is not the only department I've had trouble with. The transparency is gone in this city. You guys are not calling your constituents back. You guys might be, but your head office people, we leave messages on their voicemails and we send them emails, no response back. So, I'm so frustrated with this nightmare. I have a legal document that says, yes, I can put banners on, but I'm told I can't even order my banners because we're waiting on Jeffrey from West Star to give me permission to do so. That was the very first thing I did, was get the permission I needed, I was told to get. And that's what I did. I've jumped through so many hoops on this project. I'm sitting back at square one, can't order my banners. Here we are ready to do another empowerment grant. We want to order more banners, but we can't order those banners if we don't know if we can put the first banners up. So I'm totally confused. Maybe you can figure out. But the very last page is started on the end. That all shows you where the banners will go and how they will look on these poles that we have picked out. So that will tell you what actually we want to do. Anybody have any questions for me? Thank you.
Need any more time?
Yes.
Need any more time to finish the presentation?
No, I'm sort of kind of done.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilman Jensen.
Do you have anything in writing from West Star where they gave you permission to use their poles?
No, because I was told from West Star that I didn't need to get their permission because the city actually pays them something to use the poles, and so I had to get city permission.
Right,
I have the letter showing that I had to have city permission. So I went through Timothy, I went through Mike, I went through Jeff, and I was told I had permission. I have several letters giving me permission to do that. And I was also told this contract was supposed to be the final legal thing for us to put the banners up.
Yes, ma'am,
but you go around town, you can see other banners on utility poles.
Right, but nobody from West Star gave you that in writing.
No, so now we're back to Jeffrey at West Star.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was my question.
Any, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. On this agreement, it says, whereas the city wishes to establish a policy. So do we have a policy or not?
City manager?
I'm not 100% sure whether we do or not. I haven't looked at that particular part of it. I'll find out. Unless anybody else knows specifically.
Just kind of says the city.
Can I have the floor?
City manager, yes.
Yes, I'm aware of some of these issues that have happened regarding this project, and it's unfortunate that we have made some mistakes along the way on this. But we're working through them. Staff has made me aware of the issues. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to get back to you. Been working on some other projects. We'll meet with you and go through in more detail some of these things with you. But yes, we're aware of it, and we're trying to work through the issues to make sure that we can do this if we can. I mean, that's one of the things that, with the locations, they are West Star, and it is their authorization in order to put it on their poles. We were also looking at the possibility that there may have been poles that the city happened to own that we could have utilized in order to make this happen if we ran into conflicts related to West Star. So So we're working through the issues. There are many things that need to be addressed for this, and so it is being worked.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments, Teresa.
Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Mr. Joseph Ledbetter. We'll go to break before that.
Good evening, everybody. I hate following Teresa. Wow, great speaker. I mean that, you know that.
I know you are.
Okay. So I was amazed. I was sitting here hearing people say, well, what can we do to fix potholes in Topeka? I'm going, well, I'm going to talk about some of that. That's interesting. But I did send you a location of some potholes that you might want to pay attention to this coming week and get some trucks out there and actually fix them. It's the mile that runs along the north side of Heartland. And I've sent those pictures in before and have seen very little activity in response over the last year when I've sent them. The reason I'm out that way a lot is I've got a farm out that way. I lived out there for a while, and I used that road. And the many years I was out there, it's a city road. It's never been properly maintained. One of the things that happens when you don't maintain these roads, you don't do crack and seal, and you don't fix the potholes right, is you get a lot of water into the road base. And of course, that crumbles the road and makes the repairs about 12 times more expensive to fix. And so a little prevention would go a long ways in this town. If they preventively fix these potholes correctly, you would see a lot less cost in time. Let's talk about some numbers. The county has 800 lane miles under its control. The city has 1,600 lane miles under its control. Drive the roads and see the difference as to how they're maintained. But more than that, look at the size of the budget. The city has 3 times the budget to maintain those road miles. We get half of the sales tax money from the county. Now, the problem is that we're really not solving the problems. We keep doing the same thing over and over again. I just sent you another email from a CLE I took last Friday. That's a lawyer. He's standing in front of a quote from Einstein. And we're never going to fix these problems by doing it the same way 10 years in a row if they aren't being fixed. And by the way, I will tell you, I like new ideas, and I like what Brendan was bringing up earlier about the zoo, and I just want to go to their sidebar. And that is a good name, Brendan. Yeah, finally got a laugh out of him. Okay, so, but one thing I want to point out is when we're ignoring the public's vehicles and how their vehicles are being torn up on these roads, did you ever think about the 800 city vehicles we're also tearing up by not fixing these roads right? And what that cost us in maintenance and what that cost us in fleet repair? Last year there was a lot of ballyhoo from a few people. We've got to have more money. We've got to have more money. And if you really look at public policy problems deeply, a lot of times it's not about money. It's about leadership. It's about having people that actually get out and oversee what's going on and making sure that it's done properly and making sure that staff occasionally sees them and knows, wow, evaluating government, and knows that they are going to be evaluated and there's going to be benchmarks and there's going to be performance. You know, one of the things I liked about the zoo presentation was to see how many less FTEs he has to run a larger operation. And we should be seeing that in public works. We should be seeing that in different entities in our city, that increased and enhanced productivity. And Brendan's done a remarkable job of doing that. So I'm just doing this to put out some food for thought. I sent you an email earlier. I'm out of time. If you'll review that email I sent earlier, I'd appreciate it, because I'm going to continue to talk about that during the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ledbetter. At this point in time, we do have to recess into an executive session. If the city attorney would please read the parameters.
The motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss upcoming employer-employee negotiations as justified by KSA 75-4319B3. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamandola, Human Resources Director Jackie Russell, Utilities Director Bob Sample, Deputy Utilities Director Braxton Copley, Deputy Administrative and Financial Services Director Nick Hawkins, Senior Assistant City Attorney Captain Walter, Payroll Manager Teresa Steinlage, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes.
We have heard the parameters of the executive session. At this point in time, is there a motion to accept them? We have a motion by Councilwoman Ortiz, a second by Councilman Cohen. At this point in time, we proceed with the vote.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point, we're going to take a 5-minute recess before entering the executive session. Again, no action is expected to be taken after that meeting. The executive session has concluded. No action has been taken. The meeting is adjourned.